Your grandmother followed 11 rules before she ever stepped out the front door, and she had followed all 11 before the sun was fully up. You did not know they were rules. You thought it was just who she was. You thought every woman woke before her family, sat down at a mirror in the gray morning light, and built herself into something the world could not look away from. It took you 50 years to understand that what you were watching was not vanity. It was armor and grace and a quiet act of defiance all at once. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. The first rule lived in a sentence. You heard it every single day of your childhood, and you will hear it in her voice until the day you die. You do not leave this house looking any kind of way. She said it when you ran for the door with one sock down. She said it when you tried to slip out to the corner store with your hair half done. She said it the way other mothers said, "Be careful," because to her it meant the same thing. Be careful. The world out there is watching you, baby, and it is not watching kindly, and you will not give it one single thing to point at. That was the rule underneath all the other rules. Every powder, every pin curl, every pressed collar, every careful inch of her was an answer to a country that had decided long before she was born that a black woman was something less. She looked that country in the eye every morning, and she answered it without saying a word. She answered it with a face so composed, a posture so straight, a presence so undeniable that the answer could not be argued with. "You are wrong about me. Look again." She woke in the dark. The house was still. She went to the mirror the way some women go to the altar, because in a way it was one. She opened the jar of Pond's, and the cool, clean smell of it filled the quiet room. She pressed her fingertips into it and worked it up the column of her neck and over the planes of her face in slow, deliberate circles. She never rushed this. Rushing was for women who did not understand what they were doing. She was not in a hurry. She was getting ready to be seen, and being seen, for a black woman in 1955, was not a small thing. It was the whole battle. There was a rule about the neck, and she said it out loud often enough that it lives in your bones now. Everything you put on your face, you put on your neck. The neck tells the truth, a face tries to hide. So the Pond's went down past the collarbone, and the cocoa butter after it. The yellow brick of Palmer's worked soft between her palms and smoothed into her elbows and the backs of her hands. Because there was a word in your house that no child wanted said about her. The word was ashy, and your grandmother declared a quiet, lifelong war on it. Ashy was not a look. Ashy was a verdict. Ashy said nobody at home is paying attention to this child, and no grandchild of hers was walking into the world carrying that sentence on her skin. She did her face in the gray light with a steadiness that looked like calm and was actually discipline. She used the Posner Foundation because Posner was one of the few companies in America that had bothered to notice that black women came in more than one color. She had found her exact shade, and she mixed it a little lighter or a little deeper on the back of her hand as the seasons turned her skin. A breath of color on the cheek, but never so much that anyone could see it as makeup, because the rule there was older than she was. The work must never show. The world could see the result. The world could never see the effort. A woman who let the effort show had given something away. That rule reached all the way to the bathroom door, and the bathroom door stayed closed. Your grandfather, in 51 years of marriage, never once saw the pins, the jars, the process, the in-between. He saw her when she was finished. He saw the woman she had decided to present, and he never knew, because she never let him know, that the woman was built fresh every single morning by a pair of patient hands in the gray light before anyone else was awake. That was not deceit. To her, it was dignity. Some things a woman keeps as her own. The making of herself was hers. There were rules for the hands, and she enforced them on you with a soft relentlessness, because she believed your hands told the world everything. She would take your hand, turn it over, and look. The look was the whole lesson. Your hands are your report card, she said, the nails clean and shaped, the cuticles eased back with an orange stick after the dishes were done. A little Jergens worked in, the smell of it like cherries and almonds, the smell of every grandmother in your neighborhood. Her own hands had worked since she was a girl. They had scrubbed other women's floors and washed other women's laundry, and they were not soft, but they were tended. They were cared for, and caring for them, when the world did not care for her, was its own quiet sentence spoken back at the world. Then there was Saturday. Saturday was the beauty parlor, and you need to understand what that room really was. From the outside, it was a storefront with a hand-painted sign. Inside it was something the rest of America did not have and could not touch. It was a room owned by a black woman, run by a black woman, full of black women, where not one white person stood watch over anybody. In 1956, there were almost no rooms like that in this country. The beauty parlor was one of them. Your grandmother went on Saturday. She sat under the warm hum of the dryer with a magazine in her lap. She was not anybody's maid in that room, and she was not anybody's problem, and she was not the only one of her kind. She was simply a woman among women, getting beautiful, being heard. Miss Thelma, who owned the shop, knew every secret on that street and kept all of them. The talk moved around that room like warm water. Whose son was in trouble, whose husband had lost his work, who needed a meal left on a porch. There was the collection that would be quietly taken up for the family that could not make rent. The beauty parlor looked like vanity to anybody who did not understand it. It was a sanctuary. It was a newsroom. In 100 towns across the South, it was where the movement did its quiet work, because it was the one place the powerful were not listening. So when your grandmother sat down in that chair on a Saturday, she was not being vain. She was going to the one place in her week that belonged entirely to her own people. She came home lighter. You saw it. You did not understand it, but you saw it. There were rules the women taught each other in rooms like that one, rules about how to carry yourself, and some of those rules even had names. There were charm schools for black women in those years. They were founded and run by black women because the white finishing schools would not have them, and they were not about to wait to be invited. A woman named Ophelia DeVore built one. They taught the walk, the posture, the way to enter a room, the way to hold a sentence. From the outside, a person might call that small. It was not small. It was a group of black women standing in a country that called them coarse and unrefined, and answering by becoming so polished, so composed, so graceful, that the lie could not survive the sight of them. Your grandmother had that posture, chin level, back straight, shoulders easy. She had been taught it, and she taught it to you, balancing a book on your head down the hallway while you giggled, not knowing she was handing you 100 years of women refusing to be made small. She had a 5-minute face for the unexpected knock at the door, because a guest would never catch her undone. She had pin curls set every night of her life, her hair wound and pinned under a silk scarf before she slept, because the scarf was not optional and never had been. She had one good bottle of perfume, and she touched it to her wrists and the hollow of her throat, never sprayed, because a woman should be discovered, she said, not announced. She had the lipstick blotted on a square of tissue so it would last through the sermon and the dinner and the long ride home. She had the mirror by the front door, and she stopped at it every time, not from worry, but from habit so deep it had become a kind of grace. And every rule, every single one, she was pressing into you while you watched. That was the last rule and the deepest one. You pass it on, not with lectures, with Saturday mornings, with her hands on your hands, with the jar of pawns slid across the vanity toward you the first time, and the quiet nod that meant, "Go on, you are old enough now." She was not teaching you to be pretty. Pretty was the smallest part of it. She was teaching you that you came from women who refused, who would not be made small, who looked a cruel century in the face and answered it with a straight back and a clean pair of hands and a presence it could not deny. She was handing you your inheritance, and the inheritance was not the powder or the pins. It was the knowing that you were already and always had been enough. Then the world changed, and a great deal of that change was good and hard won and right. Your daughter could walk out of her door in jeans with her hair natural and free, and she did not have to armor herself against a store clerk's eyes to buy a loaf of bread. And your grandmother, if she had lived to see it, would have wept with joy at that freedom. She had wanted that freedom. She had helped, in her small Saturday ways, to win it. But somewhere in the winning, the vanity grew quiet. The neighborhood parlor closed when the chains came. Posner faded off the shelf. The charm schools shut their doors. The jar of pawns was replaced by a plastic bottle nobody could pronounce. And the gray morning ritual, the mirror like an altar, the hands moving slow and certain, the closed bathroom door, the whole inheritance of it was set down by a generation that was never told it was worth carrying, not thrown away, just set down. And a thing set down for long enough starts to look, to the people walking past it, like a thing that was never there. But you remember the smell of the pawns in the cold morning room. You remember the warm hum of the dryer at Miss Thelma's and the sound of women laughing in a room that was theirs. You remember her hand turning yours over to read it like a report card. You remember her voice at the front door and the chin she lifted with one finger, so your eyes met hers. And you remember that you walked out into a hard world every single day of your childhood, wrapped head to foot in the most powerful thing a person can be given. You walked out knowing somebody had decided you were worth the trouble. You can pick it back up. The jar is still on the shelf at the drugstore. The silk scarf is still in the bottom drawer. You can sit your granddaughter down in the gray morning light, and you can show her the slow circles and the patient hands and the straight back and the level chin. You can teach her that this was never about being looked at. It was about looking the world in the eye. You can hand her the knowing. You can tell her where it came from and how far back it goes and what it cost the women who carried it to her. She will think you are just fussing. She will think every grandmother does this. And then one gray morning, 50 years from now, she will sit her own granddaughter down at a mirror, and her hands will move slow and certain, and she will hear your voice come out of her own mouth without her ever deciding to say it. You do not leave this house looking any kind of way, baby. You come from women, and women like us were never, not for one single day, anything less than enough. Did your grandmother have a rule about how you left the house? Was it Posner or Sweet Georgia Brown on her vanity? Do you remember Saturdays at the beauty parlor? Tell me the rule she taught you. Tell me her name. I read every single comment.